One of the more common criticisms I've seen for the Odyssey is that the film takes a lot of creative liberties as an adaptation and is therefore unfaithful to the original work. While I think that's a fair criticism, I do want to open up the discussion about how a bad adaptation can still be a good piece of media on its own. I think between the growing demand of anime manga adaptations to be one-to-one and how streaming services often create TV series for IPs with the promise of being more accurate, there is a greater expectation these days for adaptations to be more faithful to their source material. I think most of us have read The Odyssey or at least some excerpts of it in our lives, so when you watch the Odyssey movie, there are some notable things that are changed or left out, like the nobody trick with the Cyclops, the fact that Odysseus is played off as a more reluctant hero that regrets many of his actions, and the lack of major appearances of the gods besides Athena. But it does bring up an interesting question because I believe The Odyssey is still a good movie, even if it's technically a bad adaptation, but I feel like a lot of current discourse is having a hard time distinguishing the two. If you're an anime manga fan, which if you're watching me, you probably are, remember that the 90s Sailor Moon anime takes a lot of liberties from the manga, and in fact, we do have a more accurate adaptation, Sailor Moon Crystal, but a lot of people still prefer the 90s adaptation instead. The Shining movie is considered a classic, and while I haven't read the book, many people don't consider it a faithful adaptation with a changed ending, alterations to Jack and Wendy's character, and the surface level exploration of the supernatural phenomena. And Howl's Moving Castle, which barely mentions a war at all in the novel, is the centerpiece of the Studio Ghibli movie, which obviously necessitates multiple different changes to be made, where it's basically its own thing, but we still accept it as a good movie. So clearly adaptations can be beloved while still being unfaithful to the original work, or is Nolan's Odyssey one of those cases where the source material is so recognizable that for many people, the adaptation is doomed from the start because changes inevitably will have to be made? Because let's be real, there's no way a 24-book poem is gonna fit into a 3-hour movie. It's just not possible. I personally feel like I try to ignore an adaptation's inaccuracies and try to see the work as a piece on its own, but I'm curious to see what other people feel about this conversation.